I'm not looking at this election through the lens of being a Republican. I'm looking through the lens of being an American that cares more about the future of my country than the moral bankrupt nominee of my party. There are political ramifications to this decision, but they pale in comparison to 4 more years of Donald Trump, both home and abroad. It's my time to ask a favor of all those thousands and thousands of Republicans across the country who've given us words of encouragement. I have an ask. My ask is this: it is your time to do the right thing. Don't give Donald Trump 4 more years to continue to destroy this country.
A powerful and urgent message from an important and highly credible source. You might remember Jeff Duncan. He's Georgia's former Republican lieutenant governor, a lifelong Republican at that, who in May announced that he would vote for President Joe Biden in 2024. He represents a vital segment of the coalition President Joe Biden is trying to assemble to win in November. Disaffected Republicans who rightly view tonight's debate not as one between two parties, right-left stuff on the line, but as one between a man who tried to put our democracy underwater, to torch it, to burn it all down, and someone who has vowed to preserve and protect it at all costs. Joining our conversation, political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, MSNBC political contributor Greg Bluestein's here, and out in Atlanta, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. David's back with us as well. Greg, it strikes me that we started, you're like a regular, right? But we started talking to you ahead of and sort of around the release of the tape, of the Raffensperger call, right? And a lot of what you've helped us understand is a fracture, not about whether they're Republicans or not even really whether they support Trump or not, but about the big lie. And Raffensperger and Kemp are just, they're sort of singular, right? And I mean, Georgia's Republican elected officials are in almost a class of their own. And whether they support Trump or not, they do seem to be this flashing sort of sign of life that you can be a Republican and acknowledge the truth about Trump's defeat. I know there are a lot of Republicans in Georgia who don't, right? I mean, Georgia has everything. But I wonder if there's anything about where the debate takes place tonight that triggers any of those fractures from 2020.
You're so correct. I mean, the Republican Party in Georgia is splintered, but the debate site here in Atlanta is full of symbolism. I mean, we're not far from State Farm Arena, the home of the epicenter of election fraud lies involving poll workers who were accused of doing awful things they didn't do. We're not far from the Fulton County Courthouse, of course, which is the center of where that criminal trial is taking place, or is going to take place, involving that Raffensperger phone call and so many other efforts by Donald Trump and his allies to overturn the election results in 2020. And we're not far, of course, well, we're in the center, really, of one of the premier battleground states, where so many independent-minded voters helped swing the 2020 vote to Joe Biden, but also helped elect Republicans like Governor Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to a new term in 2022.
Vaughn Hilliard, I have a million questions for you. Why don't you just start? Actually, is Melania there? Who's there with Trump tonight, other than the Red Tide Brigade?
So our best understanding at this point in time, Melania Trump, the former First Lady, is not flying with him here. This would, if she did show up tonight in Atlanta, our understanding is Jill Biden, the former, or I should say the current First Lady, is going to be here. But Melania Trump has yet to appear on the campaign trail since he launched his bid back in November of 2022, except for the day this last March that she went to a polling location to vote with him back in Florida.
Vaughn, take me inside what the vibe is like there in a place, as Greg Bluestein said, with a lot of not just symbolism, but a lot of the carnage Trump promised really did play out in that state. I mean, we heard the testimony from Raffensperger about the tragic doxing and threats that his family, the women in his family, received. He described them as, quote, sexualized. We heard Gabriel Sterling be the first Republican to go to a microphone and say, quote, someone's going to get shot because of the lies Trump was telling about not losing an election that he clearly lost, according to Bill Barr and all of the Republicans in his own campaign and administration. Just tell me what it feels like in that state almost 4 years later.
Right. There's a reason that this debate is taking place here in Georgia. And I think it would be surprising if President Biden didn't bring up the facts of what played out here in the state with the poll workers and with the efforts to overturn the election and the indictment that had 19 co-defendants, Donald Trump being one of them, because when you look at Donald Trump ever since really January 6, 2021, he actually has faced very few questions about the efforts to overturn the election. He has only done 2 mainstream press interviews over the last 3.5 years. He didn't engage on the Republican debate stage. And so that's where tonight, over these 90 minutes, they're going to be a unique experience, at least for Donald Trump, because he has been largely able to avoid those serious questions or having to come to terms with what so many, including those here in Georgia, ultimately went through. And I think that that's where Brian Kemp, who was just walking behind us here in the spin room a few moments ago, is such a unique character in this Republican Party. And that fact that Donald Trump tried to oust him, effectively primary him in 2022, and failed to do so. Donald Trump was successful in so many ways in ousting others. The list of those that actually came through unscathed is very small. Right? It's Brian Kemp, Brad Raffensperger, Lisa Murkowski out of Alaska. But they are sort of these oddities in the Republican Party here today. And it would not be unsurprising for Joe Biden, much like a new campaign commercial they put out here today, to openly suggest that, people like Brian Kemp, people like Mike Pence are still unwilling here today wholly back him for the presidency, a Republican for the presidency in the year of 2024.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.